Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Megan Miller, and this is Eric Flowers, and we're the co-founders of PracticalServiceDesign.com, a community in Slack for service designers and service design enthusiasts all over the world. We are really excited today to be bringing you a webinar and featuring Jim Kalbach. He's going to be talking about a topic that came up in the last month that's really kind of got some hot attention from the community in Slack, so much so that we wanted to bring in an expert and have a discussion on that. And that topic is jobs to be done. So we're going to get started in just a minute here. We're watching people kind of jump into the webinar, get their stuff installed. A little PSA before we get started. If you haven't yet joined the Slack community, go to practicalservicedesign.com/community. And you can get an invite to the Slack channel, and that's where we're going to be having discussion and Q&A today. So if you're in Slack, make sure you're joining the webinars channel and post your questions during Jim's talk. I'll be collecting them, and we'll curate a Q&A after the talk. All right. Eric is checking to make sure people can hear and see us. So if you're in Slack, can you give us a thumbs up? Or...
Okay.
Awesome.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I'll introduce Jim here. Jim is a noted speaker and author. He's the head of customer success at Mural, which is becoming our new preferred service blueprinting tool. It's like a big virtual whiteboard. We're pretty much using for everything now, including the format you can read about in our guide. He's written 2 books for O'Reilly, Designing Web Navigation, and the brand new Mapping Experiences book, both available now, and blogs at experiencing-information.com, the blog where I got this, got the idea to invite him from a recent blog article about jobs to be done, and tweets at Jim Kalbach. So Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Eric. Thanks, Megan, for that great introduction. Yeah, jobs to be done is a topic that I've been interested in for quite a while now, and have dabbled in various ways, both in my practice, but reading a lot about it as well, too. So I don't know if there is such a thing as an expert in jobs to be done. I don't know if I qualify, but I may be one step ahead of some other folks on the line. So I really just see this as me sharing my experiences. And we want to have this be an open conversation, right? So if you do have questions, you can type them in, and I'm going to stop about midway, and we can have a little chat. And then at the end, hopefully, we'll have a bunch of time for some more questions.
Sounds great.
So yeah, my Twitter handle is @JimKalbach if you want to follow me there. And Eric already mentioned I work for Mural. We have a free trial at mural.co. You can see the sign behind me. Oops, over here, big sign, Mural sign over there. Designing Web Navigation was my first book in 2007 with O'Reilly. And that kind of reflects my background in library and information science and information architecture. But pretty much since then, I've been interested in strategic aspects of product and service design, and that's kind of wrapped up in my book that came out in May, Mapping Experiences. And in that book, I touch on the topic of jobs to be done. But I do have some other experiences that I don't talk about in the book that I wanted to bring into this conversation here. So just briefly, I basically have 4 sections. I wanted to talk briefly about the origins and the background of jobs to be done, and then talk about a framework. And that I actually have a framework that I'm going to unveil here, propose here as a way for us to talk about jobs to be done. And then I want to give some examples and talk about how you can apply jobs to be done. And I'll take a break right in the middle of that as well, too. Where does this topic, this moniker, this label come from? And I think in theory, it comes from a famous quote by a guy named Theodore Levitt, a famous Harvard business professor. He was one of the first editors-in-chief of the Harvard Business Review. And he said, people don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. And what his thinking was, this was in 1960-ish, or maybe a little bit earlier, or a little bit later, but right around 1960. And the thinking at the time, reflected in this quote, is to not focus on the thing that you're trying to sell, the product or the service that you're trying to sell, rather focus on what people are trying to get done with that product or service, right? They want a whole. That's their goal. That's their desired outcome. And I think you see this reflected in a lot of marketing literature where they talk about their features and what it can do and how powerful it is. But what he's suggesting here is to focus on the goal, what people are trying to get done. And that's really the inspiration. He never used the term jobs to be done, but this quote and all the thinking around it was kind of the inspiration for the term jobs to be done. And making that term popular, the actual phrase jobs to be done, didn't come from Clayton Christensen. He got it from someone else. I forget the person's name. He mentions it in his second book, The Innovator's Solution. But Clayton Christensen really popularized the idea. And he latches onto this as a core principle, a core concept within disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation, he laid it out in his landmark book, The Innovator's Dilemma. If you don't know The Innovator's Dilemma, go out and get it. It's a fascinating read and one of the kind of most widespread fundamental business theories out there. But it's actually in the second book, the lesser known of these two, The Innovator's Solution. Chapter 3 of that book, he really talks about jobs to be done, and he talks about the origins of it, where he got inspired for the term, but also the concept. He talks about that Theodore Levitt quote that I talked about, but he talks about how to operationalize it to some degree. I think one of the criticisms, so the origins, I think, of modern jobs to be done really come from Clayton Christensen. Oh, by the way, he just published a book. I think I have a screenshot of it coming up. He just published a book like 2 weeks ago pretty much on jobs to be done. So he's expanding much more deeply into jobs to be done as well too. But the chapter 3 of the Innovator Solution, he talks quite a bit about jobs to be done and the origins of it. Oh, there's the screenshot. He's not the only person talking about jobs to be done though. And in fact, in the Innovator Solution, he talks about Anthony Ulwick or Tony Ulwick, the book here on the left, What Customers Want. And Tony Ulwick, for the past 20 years, his work even kind of predates the Innovator's Dilemma and the Innovator's Solution as well too, looking at what he calls desired outcomes. And I'll talk a little bit more about desired outcomes there. And his whole company called Strategen. Their whole business offering focuses on jobs to be done, uncovering jobs to be done, finding which ones have the most opportunity, and then trying to capitalize on them as well too. Also, Bob Moesta at the Rewired Group and some of his other colleagues there, they have some great podcasts and resources as well online. Oh, if you go to strategen.com, I think it's strategen.com, but find the Strategen website, lots of resources there. Bob Moesta, lots of great resources there as well too. So Clayton Christensen isn't the only one working in this area, that there are firms and companies and consultants using jobs to be done as the basis of their consulting offering. And this book, Competing Against Luck, that's the one that just came out. Clayton Christensen and friends there talking really about why customers behave and buy what they do. So the idea of jobs to be done, I'm trying to summarize it in the slide right here. So, and it's really tough because the concept is slightly complex. You think about, there's a couple of different ways when you hear that label, jobs to be done, that you interpret that right away. And one label is to think about it as a task or a use case. And that's oversimplifying it. It's much more than just a task or a use case. It's not talking about completing a task or an action. Actions are part of jobs to be done, but it's really about trying to reach a goal or a need. But it's not about all needs, right? Because we have higher level needs. We want to be popular. We want to be successful in our jobs. Those aren't really jobs to be done. We can classify those as needs. Really, I think the best and simplest way to think about jobs to be done is progress towards a goal. So jobs to be done sees people as kind of goal-driven actors. That we have a desired outcome. Whether it's implicit or explicit, most of the time it's implicit, by the way, but we have this, we're trying to get something done. We're trying to improve our lives, fix a problem. We're motivated in some way to move from point A to point B, and the job to be done is the progress towards that goal. And this goes beyond demographics. We're not, in fact, it's a different perspective than demographics, right? We're not talking about the age of a group of people and how much they spend and where they live and those types of things, which isn't bad information to have, but the problem with demographics is they don't show causality, right? Nobody bought a drill because they're 45 years old and make a certain amount of money. That's not why they buy the drill, right? So I think the real what's kind of unique or fresh or impactful with the jobs to be done perspective is that they can show causality, right? If we see people as goal-driven actors, we can predict their behavior. And it's really about trying to predict people's behavior by looking at why they hire products. And that's the term that Clayton Christensen and his colleagues use when they're looking at jobs to be done, that we have a product or a service, right? Why do I hire that? Why do I use Intuit's QuickBooks Online? Or why do I buy a certain type of food or a chocolate bar or a car? Why do I do these things? I hire them to solve some job for me, to get me closer to my goal. And jobs to be done are also not about solutions. So the best framing of a job to be done doesn't talk about a specific solution. In that case, they tend to be universal, and the longevity is there as well too. So we can talk about the same job that people have had for years or even decades. That the job doesn't change, how they solve it changes. So what we're trying to do when we're talking about jobs to be done is getting at the root cause of why people behave the way that they do and look at their progress towards that goal. And it's really a reframing of some things that we already know in user-centered design, in service design. This doesn't necessarily bring in, particularly for service designers and design thinking practitioners and things like that. You might hear some of the things I'm about to talk about and say, well, that sounds familiar, and that's good. I think it reframes a lot of things that we're already comfortable with. So that's just a quick background. You can go out, take a look at anything from Clayton Christensen. The new book is absolutely great. Look at Tony Ulwick's stuff. He's got lots of articles and PDFs and things you can download from his website as well too. I think, Tony Ulwick in particular has really operationalized jobs to be done. He can, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, but he can really pinpoint where there's an opportunity from the customer's perspective, not an opportunity from like market size or anything like that, but where will effort be best spent to win over a customer so that they hire your service? And he's really operationalized that and almost gotten it down to a science. One complaint I have with Clayton Christensen is that he talks about this theory and then he always gives examples, but he doesn't really tell us what to do with it or how to do it. So I think, from my perspective, I've been reading and in contact with a lot of this theory for quite some time now. So I came up with, and this is the thing I'd like to present here for the first time. I made this graphic for this session. So I've never really talked about this in this way before. But if we look at all of the parts of a job to be done, I see it along kind of two axes. First of all, there's the different dimensions of a job to be done. Again, a job to be done implies a task, and there's often a task involved. So that's the functional job to be done. I need to get something done, a task. But we can also talk about emotional jobs and social jobs as well too. And the emotional job is how do you feel about the job while you're making progress towards the goal. And the social job is how am I perceived by others while I'm doing that as well too. So that's the one dimension here is that kind of the different types of jobs: functional, emotional, and social. And then jobs to be done are also contextual. The job may change given the context, right? So you also want to know the situation, the motivation, and then what I call the desired outcomes. And I think for service designers, that's particularly relevant because when we talk about things like service blueprint, what we're trying to do is look at the circumstance of the environment, the setting that our customers are operating in, trying to capture some of these things. We might not use these labels, but in effect, I believe, and I talk about this in my book as well too, when we map out a service or map an experience, what we're really trying to look at is what's the context in which this product or service is going to be used. So we have that circumstantial view, that situational view of things. So basically, I'm looking at these 6 elements as a way to describe a job to be done. And I'll just give a quick example. So, this is a great example too of a frame. I'm framing this job in terms of hiring a keyless lock. Why would I hire a keyless lock? When we look at the actual job to be done, though, we've wanted to lock our doors or stay safe for a very long time. So the keyless lock is actually a solution to almost a timeless job to be done, right? Keeping your home safe, right? Those types of things. So, but I'm going to talk about it in terms of why would somebody hire a keyless lock. The functional job is to control access to my home, right? Again, you can do that in different ways, but that's the functional job I need to get done. I want to feel secure in my home, and for the social job, I want to let visitors in but keep strangers out, right? So we have this solution, and I can describe the job to be done along functional, emotional, and social dimensions. And then if I go to my other axis there, is what are the circumstances around hiring a keyless lock, right? So, the situation, private homeowners, they need to let people in and out when they're not home during the day, right? We've all had this problem of letting the cable guy in or taking a package and that kind of thing, or maybe a guest is coming in the middle of the day and they don't have a regular key, but with a keyless lock, you can let them in. So the motivation, and you can think about motivation as a problem. It's the trigger or the motivation. What problem are they? It's selective access, right? And also the problem of scheduling visits. The desired outcomes to maximize options for entry and exit, to reduce the chance of intruders, to increase my sense of security as well, too. There may be more. I'm just really kind of paraphrasing here in an example, how you would take those 6 aspects that I talked about and use it to describe a particular solution in this case and why people might hire this solution, right? So I think, again, as service designers, what jobs to be done gives us, and the framework that I just proposed, it gives us a way to kind of capture observations of the outside world. We talk with customers, we observe them, we look at people. How are we going to digest that and break it down in a way that we can then use it in a team or an organization to provide a solution? And of course, service blueprinting is one way you do that. Personas are another way. But I think we can describe jobs to be done using these 6 dimensions as well, too. I wanted to take one quick deep dive on desired outcomes, and then we'll take some questions. A desired outcome, and this is Tony Olwick's method. He's got a specific method for capturing desired outcomes that follows this pattern. And the normalization of desired outcomes into this pattern allows you to then quantify desired outcomes and which desired outcomes are least fulfilled. So he's really looking at unmet needs. And the first verb, so this is a way of formulating a desired outcome that I reflected on that previous slide as well, too. So the first word always expresses a direction. Because you're a goal-driven actor under jobs to be done theory, you're either trying to minimize, reduce, or lower something, or the other way, you're trying to maximize, increase, or raise something. So the first word is always going to be most likely one of those 6 terms. And then the next one is what are you trying to affect the direction on? What are you trying to raise or increase? In this case, it's an ability, right? I want to maximize my ability to allow visitors in, and then there's often a qualifier at the end during the day. So this pattern is very, very regular and normalized in a particular method that I'm going to talk about as well, too, for identifying opportunities. And they need to be in this format so that you can then quantify it. But basically, you could go out and observe the outside world, look at what people are doing, and come up with a set of desired outcomes, and then test them, or rather survey folks in the market to pinpoint where their unmet needs are. And that's what I have a project that I'm going to mention that I worked on when I was at Citrix, where we actually did this. We went out and observed a lot of different customers. I think our sample size ended up being 40 because we combined 2 studies into one. But what we did is we extracted desired outcome statements. So we formalized and normalized this desired outcomes that we observed into this pattern, maximize the ability to allow visitors in during the day. And then we tried to quantify that in a survey. And we asked people 2 questions for each statement. How important is this to you? And how well is this currently being satisfied? Scale 1 to 10 on each. And what that does is it gives you a look at the desired outcomes that are most important but least satisfied, right? And under the jobs to be done theory, that's where the market opportunity is. So we're not saying market opportunity in terms of money or demographics or any other typical market sizing effort. We're saying the opportunity from the customer's perspective are to target those unmet needs, right? And this mindset, this approach allows you to encapsulate the jobs to be done. In particular, in this case, we were looking at the desired outcomes, and then look at these along importance and satisfaction. And this is all outlined in Tony Olwick's article, Turn Customer Input into Innovation. I think it's 2002 Harvard Business Review article. It's out there. You can get the PDF. And he basically tells you how to do this method. So my colleagues at Citrix, I see at least one of them on the line here today. We actually did this. We went out and quantified all of the jobs to be done and then looked at the entire space that we were operating in. So you have to define a domain at first, but then within that domain you can look at all the desired outcomes and look at which ones are most important and which ones are unsatisfied. So that was kind of a smearing, a splattering of some origins of jobs to be done, some thoughts that I have on it, my new little framework here, and just a kind of a little bit of an insight into how you could operationalize some of these. But I want to show some examples from my own work and elsewhere where this is put into practice. But I just want to take a stop and see if there's any questions that we can get to right now, Megan and Eric.
Yeah, we had one clarification question from Joanna Cooper, I think, Joanna, sorry. Are emotional and social meant to be thought of as opposite ends of the axis in your framework, or more like categories or dimensions?
Yeah, they're more like categories and dimensions. So it's a facet, right? So you have a job that has 3 facets. I just put them in the diamond there because it looked good and I needed to put them somewhere, but they're not necessarily opposite each other. Yeah.
Here's one. Based on some of the stuff, some of the phrases you mentioned that I thought were particularly salient, it's the timeless jobs, not about the locker, about the drill, where you can take it to a whole different level of the drill. You don't want to drill, you want a hole, but what do you want a hole for? You want a hole to hang frames. Well, why do you want to hang frames? Because you're having the parents of the person you're engaged to over, and you want to be impressive with your interior design skills.
Right.
And so those timeless jobs, does that allow companies to take a big step back and try to re-innovate what they offer and say, man, if people are really trying to use our power tools for interior design, can the company that makes the drills innovate on things that are outside of their particular space? Have you seen that? Have you heard of that?
Yeah, totally. 2 things there. One is that jobs to be done are hierarchical. So one of the problems, and this is where I think Clayton Christensen's theory falls down, is he doesn't talk about level of granularity. Because just like you did there, Eric, you can take a job that's fairly self-contained. I want a hole in the wall, and then say, no, I want to hang pictures, and I want to hang pictures so I preserve memories of my family with portraits. And then it just goes up, and it ends up there's only like a handful of universal jobs, like love, happiness, success, safety. It goes to Maslow's hierarchy of needs almost. But what you want to do is you want to come at a level that's most relevant to your business, but also shows the progress towards a goal. And I think when you start talking about high level, am I safe, am I fed, am I clothed, that's too high level of a need. You want to bring it down to as close that you can get to your business. But I think so that's the first part, is that you have to be conscious of the level of granularity that you're working at, and you don't want to be too granular. Like you don't want to be like every step of drilling a hole in the wall, right? That's too small of a job, right? But you also don't want to be too much higher, like preserving memories. So you need to find that right balance. That's the first point. The second point is that I think a lot of traditional marketing segmentation, and that's part of the problem, is marketing. The way we segment our markets literally puts us into a box that we say we're in this market for this segmentation. It has this much spend. We're in this industry. These are our customers. These are not. I think when a company starts seeing or feeling that they need to, actually every company should strive to expand outside of that box that you create for yourself. That's when you look for jobs to be done and say, hey, we're not in the whole business, we're in the picture hanging business. And it allows you to expand and shift your mindsets, right? I mean, an example of that in the negative way is Kodak, right? They saw themselves in the film business, and literally chemicals, like they were in the chemical film business. And even though they virtually invented digital photography, they weren't able to act on that. I mean, why didn't they launch Flickr? Why didn't they have digital photography? Why weren't they instead in the business of sharing memories, right? Capturing memories and sharing them. I think if they expanded their field of vision from the customer's perspective, they might have strategically been able to act on those things, right?
So Jim, just to build on that, people are asking, it's something we struggle with, trying to determine that level of granularity of the goal or the job. Do you have any tips for people when they're trying to get clear on where they should be in the ladder of needs?
Yeah, so first of all, try to be as comprehensive as possible. This method in particular, the Tony Ulwick method, you need to look at all the jobs. And I think once you start formulating them and you start finding a pattern in terms of the level of granularity, right? Some of the ones that I mentioned, maximize my options for letting people in and out. If suddenly you have a job that is, increase my family's safety at home, that kind of sticks out in granularity. So I guess in being comprehensive, you'll probably get a sense of the granularity, and what you want to do is normalize your expression of jobs to be done to meet that field that you have. And if you have outliers, then that's actually going to throw your data off if you do this method. But it's actually something that I struggle with quite a bit. How do you express a job to be done at the right level of granularity?
All right, we've got questions pouring in from all sides. Eric, did you have one you wanted to highlight that you pasted?
One that might be kind of a big one we can come back to after you get through your slides, but there's a lot of talk about the job and what I'm calling the hiring cohort of you're hiring like the people that are hiring the drill, hiring the chocolate, hiring the suit. So where is this an evolution of the persona and something that, I mean, how do you innovate by having a persona and saying this person of this age that we made up with this clip art, is what we're building towards, as opposed to jobs which are very real and an aggregate of how people actually are working and what real goals are. And so do jobs need personas?
That's a great question. It's a little tricky question. I haven't completely figured that out in my own mind and in practice either. And I think jobs could fit into persona, but I also know, particularly again from Tony Ulwick, he's got another set of articles and methods even where he creates persona based on their jobs. So it's they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but I think the difference are how you're categorizing the person. So he would say categorize the person around the different desired outcomes that they have, right? Whereas typically when we look at persona, they align to some kind of marketing, demographic, psychographic segmentation. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive then, I guess, is what I believe, is that persona and jobs to be done aren't mutually exclusive. And in fact, like I just said, you can generate persona based on the jobs to be done. But I think what you need to know though is what is the target market that you're going after, right? Are you selling shoes or wine? Those might be very, very different things. So how you're going to look at jobs to be done needs to be framed broadly, but within that, then when you look at target customer types, you can type the customer by jobs to be done rather than some kind of psychographic measure. How you represent that though might look like a traditional persona.
All right, we got a bunch more questions. Do we want to let you show some examples, and then we can dive in?
Let me show some examples. Yeah. So I wanted to show some examples around understanding the market, designing for the market, speaking to the market, and then redefining the market, which is pretty much the topic that Eric just brought up a minute ago. So this is an example of a project that I did when I was working for a large legal publisher. I did some contextual inquiry type interviews and observations on site with probably about 20 different people. In this case, it was lawyers. We were looking at small law firms in Germany. That was the project I was working on. I had some more experience map-like part of this project, but this looking at new business development activities. What do they do to develop their client base? And I realized that it wasn't linear, it wasn't chronological, that these things were just kind of going on all the time. So I decided to represent my findings in a hierarchical diagram. And the bands that I have here, the blue are actions or steps, so this would be kind of a functional job type of description. The brown are the goals, and I actually represented these as desired outcome statements. And then the top level are higher level needs or values. Let me zoom in on this. So I just zoomed in on one of the sections here. But you can see down at the bottom, this was kind of a grounded approach or a bottom-up approach, right? I did all of these interviews, and then I looked through the transcripts, and I found all these things that people said, and if a couple people said it in a different way, I would record it as a task or an action, and then I categorized my actions. Right, so they want to get higher profile cases, right? That was a group of things that I heard people say. And if I put that together, that kind of rolls up to improving their reputation, right? That in that brown there. And there were a couple of other desired outcomes within improving your reputation that I also found as well too. And that rolls up to a higher level value, which is become a successful lawyer. I think the point here represents that hierarchical nature of things, that you could have a functional part of a job, like write an editorial for a local paper. Is that the level of granularity you want to work at, or do I want to talk about improving your reputation or increasing exposure in regular media, right? Or do I want to talk about becoming a successful lawyer? I think becoming a successful lawyer is too high a level. That's a value. That's a need. And I think, writing an editorial in a local paper, that's a task. So for me, the job to be done is really kind of in that, expressed in, I want to increase my exposure in regular media. I think that's where the meat is, right in there, in that middle level of the hierarchy. And then again, I've done this research. This diagram actually extends. So you can see we had a couple dozen desired outcome statements, but with the context around it as well too, including the functional job and the higher level need. I didn't include emotional jobs or social jobs in here, although there's a little bit of that in here. I didn't represent them directly in that way. When I did this, I really didn't know about emotional jobs or social jobs as a thing, as a part of this. So I really was just looking at their workflow and their tasks. But you can see, particularly as service designers, when we talk about mapping these things out, right? You can see how you can start representing these things in a consistent way inside of a diagram as well, too. And this is really also inspired a lot from Indy Young's mental model diagram book. I don't know if folks know that one, but in 2008 she wrote a book called Mental Models, and it's a very complex and lengthy process that's very, very detailed. But when you start unpacking it, it's really a catalog and a visualization of jobs to be done. When you start looking at what she's saying and how you build it, and this was really the inspiration for the diagram that I just talked about. I twisted it and I put more of a jobs to be done perspective from Tony Olwick and Clayton Christensen and others. I put that on top of Indy Young's approach because I think I realized that jobs to be done, when you're expressing them, sometimes it's not chronological. So an experience map or a journey map didn't work, so I used this hierarchical approach to understanding that. The other thing about her approach too is she's devoid of solution. Like she said, don't mention sending an email. You send a message. Don't talk about using a drill. It's I make a hole, right? So she's also trying to look at these root causes as well too. So that was inspirational to me. I'm just going to go on here. This is an example. It's a transformed version of a diagram that I created once. But this is for, it's in more of an experience map for organizing an event. So we could take this webinar, for instance. Right? This is more or less what Megan and Eric went through to organize this event. Right? They planned it. Now we're running it, and then there's going to be some kind of follow-up. This was for a particular research project that I worked on. And I was looking at activities, key questions, and feelings. So you could think about this. So you see under plan, I have this setup. So the job to be done would be set up the event, right? What are the functional jobs, emotional jobs, and social jobs in there as well too? And you notice down at the bottom, I even called it desired outcomes. Like what does that organizer want? What do they want to achieve? And I just used up and down arrows instead of writing the word out. But they want to increase the value to the organization. They want to increase their reach. They want to increase registrations at each one of these steps. So this was really an attempt to me to also inject some design, some job to be done thinking inside of experience mapping as well too. But when you look at this, like if you've ever done a service blueprint or a customer journey map or an experience map, you're like, no duh, I do this. And I would say to you, yeah, you do this, right? Which is a good thing, right? This should be familiar to everybody. I think it's just it's a specific lens on top of it that makes it a little bit more tangible, I would say, and a little bit more regular as well too. I think the other thing, by the way, about jobs to be done is that it comes from the business literature, right? These are all business guys, Clayton Christensen, Tony Ulwick, Bob Moesta, people who are talking about jobs to be done right now. And I think that kind of piques people's attentions when you mention that. Yeah, we're doing a jobs to be done. I hope business people will listen to that kind of thing as well too. So it's really taking familiar things and trying to inject this new or different perspective into it as well too. Here's the project that I was talking about at Citrix, where we had a huge sample of qualitative data, deep interviews, and we extracted jobs to be done, put them into a diagram, hierarchical diagram, like I had done based on Indy Young, mapped our features and services below that as well too, and took that into a workshop setting. Again, normalized format, devoid of solutions. Looking beyond. This was more roughly in the GoToMeeting space. We're using GoToWebinar here. This is roughly in the GoToMeeting space. But to your point, Eric, we called this how people work, not how do people use GoToMeeting, but it was like how do they collaborate at work was the implied word there. But we were trying to look broader than people just want to talk and do video cams, right? We wanted to look broader than that. So we were trying to take the conversation from a solution to what's the context and the circumstances of other jobs to be done around it. Because that's how businesses grow, according to jobs to be done theory. Businesses don't grow by expanding market share. They grow by matching user need growth as well too. And then what we did is we took each one of these and did a survey and looked at which ones were the least fulfilled or least satisfied as well too. And then you brainstorm around those, right? So you want to brainstorm around the things that are least satisfied, not just anywhere, right? So that's kind of understanding the market, right? Using diagramming, things that are familiar to us. There's also this techniques that Alan Clement came up with called the job story. Basically, if you ever worked in like software development, user stories. And he said, his first question is, where the heck did those things come from? But why are they formulated in the way that they're formulated? So he says, no, we should be writing our user stories like this. When I'm in this situation, I want to, that's my motivation or my problem, so that I can, and that's the desired outcome or the expected outcome. And this is really where I got that part of my framework from. But formulating it in this way, is regular. It leverages jobs to be done theory. It looks, beyond solutions and things like that as well too. You're trying to get to the situation and the motivation in each story. This is an example at Mural. There's my colleague Celeste Olivieri, our head UX designer, incredibly talented UX designer in Buenos Aires. And Mural, this is Mural on the right here, big whiteboard like Eric was talking about before. So we're trying to figure out a new problem over here. She's got flows and stuff, and we're working there. But she's really, really good at starting with these job stories. So basically, before we begin, she wants to know when I'm in the yellow column, I want to in the green column, so I can in the blue column. So we're able to focus our team's attention around the stories that matter the most, right? So this is, again, and you might say, yeah, but we do that in a different way. That's fine. So really jobs to be done. You can think about different approaches that are out there. I saw, Cooper's goal-driven design out there. There's human-centered. There's lots of methods that kind of take this perspective. I think what jobs to be done is a particular way of approaching that. But it is consistent, and I have to say things like job stories are really, really handy because they're very compact and impactful as well, too. Third point is about speaking to the market, so actually externalizing jobs to be done. When you're reflecting your solutions back to the market, this is an example, a generic example, based on a situation that I was in. Not around photo indexing, so I've changed that quite a bit. But we were looking at how we were talking to our market in marketing language. And the sales team and the marketing team might come up with, in this case, it was looking at a photo service, an online photo service. And they said, our automated photo indexing is the best in the industry, right? But if you think about it, what's the job to be done there is find your photos on your computer with less, thanks to our smart indexing. You can put that, as a qualification, but it's really the job to be done is trying to find images, right? So it's also a lens that you can apply to things like language. And this is what I've been trying to do at Mural with our help content. So we have a help center. An article from the Help Center, and I'm using the framework that I just showed you guys to actually structure the text in our help articles. So the functional job is always in the title. We always start with a verb. So in this case, we have a feature where you can paste content from spreadsheets and other lists, and then they appear as sticky notes. So that's the functional job. All of our titles are functional jobs. right? And then the desired outcome is the first sentence in bold across the top. Increase the ease of working with content across different documents, right? So I can cut and paste from one to the other. Then I talk about the situation. Why do I need this feature? What problem does it solve for me? I go back to the functional job because in a help desk article you want to have the details of that. But then we usually wind up with things like, feel in control, right? We try to, how is this going to help you? Or, impress your friends and things like that. So we try to include all these. So this then becomes a checklist for us when we're writing these articles. I don't want it to be dogma though. So if it doesn't make sense to talk about a social job, or if the feature is a social feature, it doesn't make sense to repeat something at the end. So, but this is a format where we can speak to the market in a consistent way. And, theoretically, it's based on what they should care about, I think. Final thing is about redefining markets. Here's a quote from Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit. And he was talking about tax software. He said the greatest competitor in tax software wasn't the industry. It wasn't other tax software products. It was the pencil, right? The pencil is a tough and resilient substitute, yet the entire industry overlooked it. Basically what he was saying is when you're doing your taxes, you have to do sub-calculations, and you have to do lots of, bringing things together. And guess what? It's easier to reach for a pencil than it is to use most tax softwares. So he saw the pencil as his competitor, right? And this is where it gets back to reframing the market: is what market are we actually in? And when you start to go head to head with your competitors, then you get feature wars, right? And then the product becomes more and more complex, but you still haven't competed against the pencil. So the idea of jobs to be done, what's the job I'm trying to do? How are people getting it done right now? Are they satisfied with that? How can I address the job and not what my competitors are doing? It helps you reframe markets, I believe. And here's a great example. So Alan Clement, I mentioned him before with the job stories. He just wrote a book. The PDF's out there. He's got some Medium pages as well too. When Coffee and Kale Compete, right? So we have this typical view of an industry, right? Doesn't coffee compete with tea and maybe Coca-Cola or something like that because they're all caffeinated drinks? How could kale and coffee compete? Well, if you're trying to get energy, right, then those things absolutely can compete. And this is really talking about looking at the market from the customer standpoint, which is they're just trying to get something done, and they don't care if it's tax software or a pencil. Right, so in that moment, you're competing with a pencil if you're tax software, or if you're trying to get energy, coffee may indeed compete with kale. So the jobs to be done perspective, I think ultimately, I mean, if you read Clayton Christensen, they're really talking about things at this high level, right? They consult the highest level CEOs in the country, right, or in the world for that matter, and they have these questions in front of them. How do I redefine my market and grow strategically? I think, kind of down at our level, we're looking at service design. I still think you can use jobs to be done to help you map. I think you can help it to talk to the market, to design products and things like that as well too. And that's really what I'm trying to do, is figure out some of these things. So I really just wanted to share some of those things. Some of them have failed. I've failed at this too, but I've just kind of worked this out more or less. And I continue to dabble in these things as I go along. So I basically, that was it. Just wanted to tell a quick story there. We got about 15 minutes, so I'd love to have more conversation.
Awesome. Wow, thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
We've got so many questions here. I'm going to start with one that's really relevant to a lot of folks in our community. Thoughts on how does jobs to be done work in the public sector, or for things like mandatory services like DMV or things like that? How does this framework help those kinds of organizations? That's from Tamsin Smith.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I'd have to think about it, but from my experience with some of these different domains, and I've worked in legal domain, for software, for different GoToMeeting and things like that, I'm confident that it can apply to any situation. For mandatory though, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to frame, and it might just be a way that you formulate it, right? And there might be a job to. I mean, the real answer is you got to talk to people. And that's where the interesting thing about jobs to be done too is they're not saying look at your traffic on your website or the number of widgets that you sell or do marketing surveys. They say go out and watch people and talk to people, and extract the jobs to be done from talking to people and watching them. So I don't know the answer to the question off the bat because I've never thought about it, but if you went to the DMV and talked to some people and watched them, you would find some jobs to be done beyond just the mandatory ones.
So it sounds like something for our community to maybe think about and workshop in Slack. So another question. When does jobs to be done work? When does it not work? What are the limits of this framework, and in what situations and contexts does it function best? That's from Antonio Starnio.
I mean, I think any context. I mean, I just suggested here that I can structure my help articles with using jobs to be done lens, or a CEO of the largest company in the country could use jobs to be done to expand strategically. So it really is, it's a perspective, it's a lens. It's a lens of looking at providing a service or product from the customer's perspective, not from demographics or psychographics or any kind of phantom segmentation that companies typically overlay on top of the market, right? That's all arbitrary and random sometimes. When you look at some segmentations that I've seen, like who cares? It's random. And often those market segmentations don't predict behavior. Right? Just because one company has more employees than another doesn't predict their buying behavior. It just allows us to bucket them in a way that data fits in there easily, or I can get the data easily and things like that. So jobs to be done can be messy. It's definitely messy and human, but we like messy. I like messy. I don't know about you guys, but we want to reach out and embrace things like emotions, and reach out and embrace things like fuzzy categories of customers and things like that.
So I have a kind of a follow-up and a kind of a combined question of a few different ones, because I've sat at the table at Intuit's building where Scott Cook watched his wife mess with a pencil. And why does bookkeeping tax software look? It was like DOS. It looked nothing like anything. And so Quicken in 1983, he made it look like a checkbook. Right. And so one of the questions that kind of came up, and you mentioned seeing what people do, kind of taking a step back, empathetic, emotional design. How would you recommend people approach finding out the job? And one of the specific questions was, so someone mentioned Simon Sinek, and someone mentioned Eric Ries, the Lean Startup, about the 5 whys, and how you get to, Scott Cook having to be there and see his wife with the pencil. Yeah. And so how would us now in 2016 go and find out, where's our pencil?
Yeah, it's watching people and talking to people. First of all, I've done a lot of primary research, firsthand research in terms of contextual inquiry methods like that, right? I think also, these days, like what do they call it, like cyber ethnography or online ethnography as well too. You could lurk in communities and that kind of thing, and collect data in different ways now online and with digital social media and things like that as well too. But as I just suggested, go out to the DMV and just talk to people and or watch them, those kinds of things. Sorry, what was the second part of your question? I had something that I was going to bring in there.
5 whys. How far back do you
5
go?
whys. Yes. Yes.
How do you get to the pencil, to the ultimate job?
Yeah, I think 5 whys is something, again, an existing technique that we all know from design thinking and things like that, right? Does it apply here? Yeah, I think it does. I think jobs to be done is a perspective on a lot of things that we already do. And I talked about them. Contextual inquiry, been there, done that. 5 whys, been there, done that. Service blueprinting, been there, done that. What is jobs to be done going to add to me? It's a lens, or it's a perspective on top of that allows you to do things in a consistent way, that allows you to do things in a way that are going to be impactful because they matter to customers, and it's allowing you to see the world from their perspectives as well too.
All right, we got another question here. So how do you prioritize the importance of emotional jobs versus functional jobs? When you have this framework, is there a way that you go about prioritizing different aspects of that framework?
Yeah, there is very, very clearly, particularly if you talk to talk to people like Tony Olwick or read what he says. I've never talked to him before, but if you were to talk to him or read anything by him, he says, oh, you need to solve the functional job before you can look at the emotional and social jobs. And I think Clayton Christensen says that as well too. I was speaking with a guy named Des Traynor. He's one of the co-founders of Intercom. By the way, I feel actually remiss at this part in the webinar that I haven't mentioned Intercom or Des Traynor right now. So Intercom is a Silicon Valley startup. I think he lives in Dublin. But if you haven't seen Intercom, check out Intercom. It's a great tool. And he's a huge fan of Jobs to be Done thinking, and he's got lots of great articles on Jobs to be Done, including an ebook that they just released. So the Intercom ebook on Jobs to be Done. I forgot your question.
Yeah, no, that's great.
What was
Thanks.
the question? No, wait, I didn't answer.
Well, the question was about prioritizing different aspects of the framework.
So I was talking to Des about it. We were emailing, and he said he doesn't necessarily believe that it's only the functional job or that the functional job has to come before the emotional job. I don't have a concrete example of that yet. So I think there's a couple of different schools of thinking. You know, Des Traynor might say, no, the emotional job can come first. Tony Olwick would say you have to solve for the functional job first. And I'll just tell you one quick example. I was doing a workshop with an online women's fashion website. So they sold online women's fashion. And I did this quick, very unscientific Jobs to be Done exercise where I had the team brainstorm jobs to be done, which is not the right way to do this, by the way, but I did it anyway. We brainstormed jobs to be done, and then we prioritized them by importance and satisfaction. We just did that was the group exercise. Let's take a look at all the jobs to be done and prioritize them to find the unmet need. And we had just spent the whole day talking about how women approach fashion. It's their own brand. It makes them feel good. We were talking about all these emotional and social jobs that women's fashion solves for women, right? But the job that came up the most was fit, which is a functional job. It doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter if the jeans look good and, you know, impress your friends. But if they don't fit, those other two things break down. So from that, I tend to agree with you. You need to solve for the functional job. Because if you can talk about the emotional aspects of women's fashion and say the most unmet need, the highest unmet need is fit. Yeah, guess what? You got to get the fit, right? So I tend to agree with going for the functional job. But the emotional jobs are super important then too, right? So you get the pair of jeans that fit. That's not necessarily why you're going to buy them. You're not going to. The only reason you buy them isn't because they fit. It's because they make you look great, you feel great, all the feelings, all the social stuff as well too. So it is all three of them. That's why I kind of tried to put all that together. It's more of a munge job on my, I'm just throwing everything out there. So I still haven't sorted it out in my mind, but I like the webinar cat too.
In Slack. Yeah, this is really great. So we're running out of time here. We have one more question to end with, which is our classic practical service design question. How can jobs to be done be implemented practically in everyone watching this webinar in their workday tomorrow? How can they go back and take this and apply this to their jobs, convince their boss, shift their team's work style? Any tips for integrating jobs to be done?
Yeah, well, I think there's two different questions there. One is how can you integrate it? The other is how can you shift your team's perspective? I have no idea on the second one, and I'm in the same fight that you guys are, particularly within large organizations. I'm happy to be in a small organization now because I don't have those big organizational challenges that I used to have in larger companies. But and I was hoping that was what my hope was with some of the examples that I showed, that you can think about functional, emotional, social jobs. You can think about situation, motivation, desired outcome, and inject that into things you're already doing, like a service blueprint. What's the situation, motivation, desired outcome? You can think about that at each step in a journey, for instance. I think you could think about how you might run an exercise, like I just said, to get a group of stakeholders to think outside of their segmented boxes that they think in. Okay, what other business are we in? How might we, and this is where things like design thinking, how might we also hang a picture on the wall, right? Do we really need a nail? And that's how the how might we methods come in as well too. So again, I think Jobs to be Done has this theoretical background that's, by the way, rooted in business thinking, and I think that's important too. So to get to your second part, how do you get other people convinced on this? Say, well, this is what Clayton Christensen says. We'll get a lot of people more. I think it'll pique their interest more than saying, I don't know, this is what Megan and Eric said. No offense to you guys, but.
So it sounds
that,
like, we gotta have people in Slack continue to tell us, how has this webinar helped them integrate jobs to be done into their workplaces, into their jobs, and we'll share some stories in the community in Slack as we go.
Fantastic. I'm happy to jump in there a little more often than I am in the community and have some follow up here as well too.
Yeah.
But,
that'd be great because we got about 50 questions and we got to maybe 10 of them.
Yeah.
So,
that's
awesome.
You're the new expert.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I have an opinion on some of these. I've danced around some of these topics, but I still struggle to operationalize these things as well too. And I'm just trying things. I'm just throwing a bowl of spaghetti at the wall and see which ones stick, kind of things. And it's different. It's different with different organizations. And one other thing too, though, just came to mind to answer your question is just structuring research. So if you do a lot of qualitative research, if you've ever done like serious qualitative research, you get a lot of data back, and you're like, how am I going to make sense of this? It's like, well, just use those 6 things, functional job, emotional job, social job, situation, motivation, desire. It's a way to structure your research as well too. So you can you use it at that level as well too. So.
Well, we really appreciate hearing your perspective and your experience and seeing all the examples of how you've integrated this into your work.
Yeah, and everybody follow Jim on Twitter, read his blog, get in Slack, contribute, make the community better. Keep talking, it doesn't have to end here. That's the nice part about worldwide, Slack accessibility. And if maybe Jim will be in there and you can talk right to him, direct to the source. So
we did record this webinar, and Jim, if you're willing to share your slide deck with the community, that would be great.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, I know I blasted a whole bunch of names and references, and I didn't want to just name drop here, but there are some centers of thought and also resources as well around a lot of the people that I mentioned too. So I saw some of them fly by here in Slack. I think you pick up most of those, Eric, right?
Yes.
Nice. Thanks,
awesome.
guys. Well, it was a pleasure being here. I really appreciate it. And I want to say something on behalf of the community, that your energy for this topic and all the stuff that you've done is absolutely amazing. When I look at practical service design, I don't know when you guys sleep. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of work that you guys do.
We don't. Yeah, it's a labor of love, and it takes all of us. So there's a lot of people that are actively working to make this community a great place to be. So we appreciate everybody.
It shows. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you guys in Slack.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.